So we're talking about coding for views. This is writing some code to utilize views to do cool things for you. Get in here. This is me. I'm Will Long. You can find me on Twitter, on Drupal.org. I've got a website that's neglected. Trying to keep it up to date. I do Drupal stuff all the time. I like to work with views. If you want to follow along, slides are online. There's a couple of repositories also that I'm going to be working out of, showing some code out of. All right, so the objective is this, to talk about the kind of some of the important stuff that we're talking about with views, some of the things you need to be aware of, just the way views operates. There's some working example code. If you want to dabble in developing some of your own stuff with views, there's an example starting point. Both of these projects I'm going to show you can use. And also, we'll talk about the things that you get from using views in your own development. So the agenda, we're going to talk about the concepts of views, talk about the views API, and then the kind of the common ways that you will actually implement views to do things for your modules. All right, so what's a view? At its most basic form, I don't think we've answered it yet tonight. Views is a black box that essentially generates a query and renders the results. That's in its most simple form, that's what a view is. A view may or may not take some input. And then it's going to dynamically create the query and then render results from that query based on however it's configured. So what you get with the view is a list of stuff. What that stuff is defined by how the modules on your site are integrated with views, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. All right, so why should I use views? I hope so some of the benefits of views have already been discussed tonight, all the flexibility of using it, and so basically the benefits of using it. It's a very powerful tool. I can write SQL. Why do I need to use views? The view does a lot more than just generate your query. It gives you a lot of other options, a lot of other benefits in terms of functionality and rendering content that it queries out. And why should you use it? Because everybody else is, and everybody else is using it because it's pretty awesome. It gives you a lot of power. So, do I need to know this? This slide is apparently not correct. But anyways, so you decide, okay, I'm going to use views. I'm developing some custom stuff for my site. I'm going to use views to list out some stuff. I can use views embed view, which loads a view and outputs the results. You can do that. You can do that anywhere you want. You can stuff that right in your template files. So essentially, in your theme, output the results of a view if you want. And you can also even use hook query alter to jump into the query that views generates and make more changes to it before it actually happens. Those are all options in terms of using views, but they're not really good options. That's essentially similar to painting a house, so painting the exterior of a house when the siding needs replaced. So you can kind of bandage it up, send it out, and it may work, but it's really not sustainable over the long haul, and it's only going to confuse site builders and more developers as they work on projects. So where do we start with developing for views? Views is essentially two things. It's plugins and handlers. We'll talk about handlers in just a second. These are plugins, different types of plugins that are available to views. Some of the main ones are the display. So the display is the mechanism that views actually uses. So different types of displays are pages, they're blocks, they're panel panes, they're XML feeds. Is there any other important ones that I'm forgetting? The EVA, the views that Jason demonstrated. So that is essentially the delivery mechanism for the view. So that hooks into other components in Drupal and says, this is a view, I'm going to output a page at this path, or this is a view, I'm going to output a block, and it's available to the block system or any of these other systems that are available within Drupal. Some of the other important ones that you'll notice is the style. So the style is configurable in the left-hand column. It's the unformatted list. It's the HTML list. If you've got different slideshow modules installed, it could be any various type of slideshow. Those are all implementing different displays. So they may actually be provided to Drupal as a page or as a block or whatever, but they're formatted HTML-wise as any types of these styles. Another one here to notice is the access. By default, you can define access to a view by either role or permission-based access. If you're running organics groups, you can also have organics groups define who can access a view. You can also provide your own access plugins to Drupal in order to provide custom logic to determine who can access it. Any type of these plugins is available to be extended upon and used in your own custom code. So we talked about plugins. The other side of this is handlers. So handlers actually deal with the data in the tables in the database. So these are the different types of handlers that are available. So we've got the field, which is actually rendering data out of a column out of the database. So we've got our node title. The node title is represented as a field that is some type of string with all the things that are applicable to a string applied to it. Same thing with the filter. The node title can be filtered as a string. If we work with node ID, it's got a numeric element to it. All those different filter handlers are overridable. Same thing with relationships. You define each column in your database. You can define what it refers to. So if it's talk about a version of a node, that's referring back to the actual node via relationship. The author of a node, the user ID. The user ID in the user table refers back to the user ID in the node table. All right, and the main benefit of using plugins and handlers is that they're using object-oriented programming, and Views itself is using an object-oriented design methodology. So what this means is that these Views, plugins, and handlers, you can override them. You can create your own custom plugin or handler, and with a minimal amount of code, change just the things that you need to be changed in order to produce the result that you want. So a plugin and handler, each of those do a fair amount of work, but if you go in and override them, the class that you override only does a small bit of work. You define which methods you want to override, and those pieces are in place. Everything else falls back to the base class, which provides all the additional functionality. And you'll see a demonstration of that in just a moment. And also, in terms of development, trying to figure out where to start, the hooks in terms of implementing Views is Views API. The Views API is just telling Views, hey, I'm using Views. When you call the rest of the Views hooks, include my module with that. Then you've also got Views data, which describes your tables. So if you have a module that describes, if you have a module that provides its own custom tables, at that point you would want to implement hook Views data in order to describe those tables to Views. What you'll see there is a bunch of metadata describing your table, along with the handlers that describe each field of the table. And then also, if you implement any plugins in your modules, you'll use hook Views plugins. Hook Views data and hook Views plugins are also alterable. So as Drupal goes in and loads all that information, it runs an alter hook on them. So if after the fact you want to go in and add more stuff to something that another module provides, you have the opportunity to do that in your own custom module.
And remember, if you're overloading the query, overload the count query too. I learned that. That's important.
All right, so the next thing we're going to do is actually look at a little bit of code. I'll try to make it as painless as possible. But before we actually get there, there's a few tips you're going to want to keep in mind if you're actually going to develop some custom code using Views. For one, is just a basic Drupal thing. If you're going to provide any classes, make sure they're in your modules.info file. Drupal's autoloader will pick them up. If you don't do that, Drupal's going to run into issues trying to load the different handlers and plugins that it's looking for. And then also, in the actual Views configuration, there's a couple options you're going to want to turn on. and I will show this to you right now. I actually don't even have the modules turned on here. So the main thing, turn on Views UI, which is going to give us views also. All right, so in terms of the settings we want to use when we're developing view stuff, we want to show the SQL query. While we're in here, we might as well show the performance statistics as well. What this will do is, as we configure the view, the live preview will actually output the SQL query that's generated by the view. That way we can see what's going on with it. So essentially what we're doing with our handlers is manipulating the query. We're providing information to views that's going to manipulate the query. And at that point we can see the end result of what views comes up with as the query. And then also here on the Advanced tab, we want to disable all the views caching. So all this information that we're providing in hooks, Views instantiates that one time and saves the whole bundle of it. That way it doesn't have to load it every single time. So without this, anytime Views wants to run a query, it would have to run all the hooks on all the modules that are integrated with Views. By doing this, we run all those hooks, we save the output once into the cache. As long as it's in the cache, we can load it right out of the cache and just keep right on going. So this is a performance thing. We actually want to disable it just for developing with it. Otherwise, you'll be running into issues, having to clear the cache all the time, weird things happening. So just whenever you want to actually develop anything that's integrated with Views, go ahead and disable the Views data caching and clear the Views cache. And I believe that's all we need on here. All right, we're ready to look at some code. We were talking about champagne earlier. Perfect. All right, case one, we've got a custom module that provides a table of stuff to Views. So what is Views? Views is a module that provides us with lists of stuff. Perfect. So we've got a table full of stuff. Let's make some lists of stuff. So let me go ahead and make sure we got this module turned on here. I actually wrote this to demo some functionality at the Drupal Camp Chicago. So this is the, if you're following along, this is the shy_13 CD, which is the Chicago 2013 Camp Custom Data Module. Go ahead and get that running here. And if I look at the code for it, we'll look at the hooks that Views is using here real quick. That ain't what I was looking for. So we've got the module file here. The only thing the module file has in it is this hook Views API. So once again, this is the module telling Views, hey, I've got some stuff for Views to use. Other than that, there's nothing in the module file. So if we load pages from the site that aren't using Views, they don't. The only thing they see is this API call. All the rest of the functions that are in our module don't even get loaded until they're needed. So this is a performance consideration here. The actual code for that is contained in the views.inc file. And what this is our hook Views data. And this is defining to Views what's in our tables. So we've got a table itself called shy13 CD colors. These first couple bits here under the table element are describing to Views what it is. So in the group that's displayed, it's going to be called Chicago 2013. In this table base information, this is telling Views that this is a base table of stuff. So things in this table are things that on their own can be queried. We're not extending something else. So say we had a table that saved how many times a node was saved. We wouldn't query that table directly. We'd only query that whenever we're querying nodes. So in this case, we have things that on their own we want to query. So this base table defines them, and you can actually see those as we go into our views and start working with views. So we go in here, add a new view. If you're looking at content, content is nodes. There's all sorts of other things on this list. We've got users out of the users table. We've got modules, files. Those are all provided by core, and they're actually technically provided by views. Views implements a bunch of these hooks for core, but those are all core data pieces. But what this module has provided us now is this HTML colors. So we're not querying nodes, we're not querying users, we're querying HTML colors, which is what's provided by this module. So we don't need a page, we don't need any of this stuff, but we do need a name. So now we're in here, and this is just the general views configuration that it gives us by default. So right off the bat, it's giving us the name as defined by the table. And you can see that information is in this hook views data by, where are we looking? Right here. So in this base declaration, we're saying name is the primary ID of the table. So whenever it creates a view of these things, name already gets added in there. Boom, it's there. We've got names. So right off the bat, we're configured with a full pager, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to go ahead and shut this off because this is not that big of a table. So we'll display all items. So this is the whole thing. So this is all the names out of all the records in that table. And we can see the SQL query that's running. Select name from our table. So just off our basic views integration, that's what it's given us. I'm going to go ahead and change a couple configurations on here just to make it easier to read. We're going to display this as a table. So now this is a table of all the names of all the colors that are in this table. If we look at the hook views data implementation here, we're going to start defining the fields that are in the table. So we've got our name column. It's got some text here to describe it. So if we want to come in here and add our field, so this is actually already in here. I'll go ahead and remove it just for the heck of it. It's going to complain because we're trying to use fields, but we don't have any fields assigned. We go ahead and add a field. These are all the fields that are available. These are all defined in hook views data, but we were looking at name. So name, we've got it's listed right here with all the description that you see in hook views data. So we'll go ahead and add it back in. There's all the standard stuff here, and what you're seeing on that screen are the handlers for the field. So that's this area right here. I'm going to not highlight it because it's hard to read. But so the field, we're talking about handlers here. So when we covered the screen of handlers earlier, the field handler is responsible for rendering the output of that column from the database. So we're actually just going to pass it along a standard views class. So we're not doing anything custom here. We're just saying use views handler field class to display this information, and it's just going to give us the basic defaults everything, and that's what you see on this screen right here. This is the basic defaults everything. We got the name. We can exclude from display, change style settings if we want, the rewrite results. All of that stuff is all provided by this base class, and if at some point we want to make changes to it, we can override it, and all this stuff stays, and only the new stuff gets added in. So we've got that, and then let's look at some of the other fields that are in here. We've got a value field. So this corresponds directly with the schema of the table. So we've got a name column in the database, and we've got a val column in the database. The val column represents the hex value of the field. So we're going to find the same thing for there. We're going to use the standard views handler field for that. Sorting wise is the same thing. So to implement the logic, if you want to do sorts by it, we're going to use the default everything for this also. So we've got the default sort action. We've got the default filter for a string. If you notice there, the views handler filters string for the value. The same thing for the argument. Those are both going to be available to us now if you look under filter.
So these things are all described in API?
So we've got hook views API, which tells views that we're going to be using views. That's in the module file. In the views.inc, we put the guts of the stuff, the stuff that...
So you have to describe the data in the inc file?
So the views.inc file is essentially metadata describing the tables that you're providing to views.
And you get information about that in api.drupal.org, or is that where you find all that?
There's a few places to find it. So the information api.drupal.org is actually generated from stuff in the views module. So if you start typing stuff into your IDE, type in hook views API, it'll find it for you and help you write your stuff out. It'll find all the documentation that's assigned to it, things like that. You can also find it on api.drupal.org. It's a convenient way to find it. You can also look at other modules that are doing stuff. So finding working implementations is also a really good way to find ways to implement this stuff.
Like the examples.
Yeah.
Or this module that's on the screen. So if we come back here and look at this, there's one more thing that's in this hook views data that's important to notice, and this is we're going to define a color field for this table. I'm not going to actually pull up the table right now, but if we look at the schema of the table, there's no actual color field. Like it doesn't even exist. So this is almost a phantom declaration here. That's this section right here. We're going to tell it for the color field, actually we're just going to query that value field again, and we're going to pipe it through this custom handler that we've defined. So let me click both of these into the view just so you can see them. So we've got the hex value of the color. This is as it actually comes out of the database.
I'm so sorry.
So that's what you're seeing over here in the hex column. Then if we actually want to look at this color column that's available to us, we can pull that out as well. So our custom handler is actually applying some custom markup to the output of this field in order to give us colors on these different results. And if we quickly look at what's providing that to us, that's going to be this field. So in order to do that, the only thing we did was create a custom class. We overrided the one function, which is the render function, and provided a bit of custom markup around the output of that, defining some styling that goes on it. So in order to turn the output of the field, which is this, or this, into something that has a little bit more meaning to it, we wrote one class. We wrote one class with 14 lines. So that's all the work that it took.